The email from my sister, Sophia, began with "Dearest Eleanor," a sweetness I knew was a prelude to poison, informing me of Mother's exclusive birthday cruise, with limited space for immediate family only. Before I could even process the familiar sting of exclusion, my phone buzzed with a text from William. "Hey, Elle. Quick favor, need you to watch the kids next weekend. Sophia and I are off on Mom's cruise." The words hung in the air, a brazen demand for my time precisely when I was deemed unworthy of theirs, twisting my hurt into a cold, hard knot of fury. Eleanor Vance meticulously arranged the last of her freshly ironed shirts, her apartment, though modest, a sanctuary of order in her otherwise often chaotic life. Another Tuesday evening, another quiet routine. She glanced at her phone, not expecting much. Family communications were usually perfunctory, often laden with unspoken expectations rather than genuine connection. An email from Sophia Thorne, her younger sister, blinked at her. The subject line, "Mom's birthday celebration cruise," initially sparked a flicker of hope, quickly extinguished by the body of the message. "Dearest Eleanor," it began, dripping with Sophia's characteristic sugary faux politeness. "Mom's so excited for her special birthday cruise. We've managed to book a truly intimate gathering, just the immediate family this time, to keep it cozy and personal. With limited space on the yacht, we had to be really selective." Eleanor reread "immediate family" and "really selective," the words stinging like subtle jabs. She was, after all, their mother's daughter. It was always like this, a veiled dismissal, a polite erasure. A familiar ache settled in her chest, a dull throb she'd grown accustomed to, the constant reminder of her peripheral status. Sophia ended with a cheerful, "We'll send you lots of photos," as if digital images could compensate for actual presence. Eleanor sighed, forcing herself to focus on the neatly folded laundry. It wasn't surprising, not really. She was always the reliable, independent one, the one who didn't need to be coddled or entertained. Which, in her family's twisted logic, meant she was also the one who didn't need to be invited. She tossed her phone onto the sofa, the screen still glowing with Sophia's cheerful betrayal. Before the email's sting could fully recede, her phone buzzed again, this time a text message from William Thorne, her elder brother. William, the golden boy whose every whim was indulged, whose every financial misstep was quietly absorbed by their mother. "Hey Elle," the text read, cutting straight to the point without any preamble. "Sophia and I need a favor. Big one. We're heading off on Mom's cruise this weekend, obviously, and need someone reliable for the kids. Liam and Chloe are a handful, as you know. Can you cover Friday night through Sunday evening? We'll be back Sunday night. Let me know ASAP." Eleanor stared at the message, her mind struggling to reconcile the two communications. Mom's cruise this weekend, obviously. The casual presumption, the blatant disregard for her own schedule or feelings. She, who was explicitly excluded from the intimate gathering, was now being explicitly demanded to provide free, unpaid labor for the very people who had cast her aside. The hypocrisy was a bitter taste in her mouth. This wasn't just an oversight, it was a deliberate, calculated exploitation, a casual assumption that her time and energy were theirs for the taking. The knot of resentment, long simmering, tightened into a palpable tension in her chest. She looked at William's final words, "Can you cover Friday night through Sunday evening for Liam and Chloe this weekend? Sophia and I are off on Mom's cruise." The words hung in the air, a brazen demand for my time precisely when I was deemed unworthy of theirs, twisting my hurt into a cold, hard knot of fury. The audacity of William's text still vibrated in Eleanor's hand, a digital slap across her face. "Figured you had nothing better to do this weekend. Sophia and I are off on Mom's cruise." The words hung in the air, a brazen demand for my time precisely when I was deemed unworthy of theirs, twisting my hurt into a cold, hard knot of fury. She paced her small apartment, the knot tightening with each step. For years, she'd been the dependable one, the unseen anchor, always available but never truly valued. This was the ultimate insult, yet another casual assumption of her unending availability, her lack of a life meaningful enough to disrupt. She stopped at her desk, fingers hovering over her phone, drafting a reply in her head that was as sharp and unyielding as a freshly honed blade. Asterisk no. Absolutely not. My time is not your default childcare service. Asterisk, she felt a surge of defiant strength, a nascent spark of self-preservation she hadn't nurtured in years. This time, she wouldn't cave. She wouldn't be the family's free labor, their convenient afterthought. She was about to tap out the refusal when her laptop chimed, signaling a new email. The sender was Arthur Maxwell. Asterisk Maxwell and Associates. Estate planning, asterisk her mother's lawyer. A cold dread seeped into her bones, replacing the anger with a familiar anxiety. Why would Arthur Maxwell be contacting her? Evelyn was perfectly healthy, if perpetually oblivious. Her thumb, already poised to strike William's number, hesitated, then slowly navigated to the email. The subject line was formal, direct, regarding the estate of Evelyn Thorne, updated last will and testament. Updated? A chill ran down her spine. Eleanor clicked it open, a sense of foreboding settling over her. The letter was polite, professional, requesting her to review the attached document and to schedule a meeting at her earliest convenience. She downloaded the PDF, her heart beginning to thump an erratic rhythm against her ribs. The document was dense with legal jargon, but Eleanor's eyes, trained by years of meticulous work, quickly found the relevant sections. She scanned past the preliminary clauses, her breath catching in her throat as she reached the specific bequests. To my beloved son, William Thorne, I bequeath my primary residence at 145 Sycamore Lane, all remaining liquid assets, and my entire investment portfolio. Her gaze flickered, disbelieving, then traveled further down. To my dear daughter, Sophia Thorne, I bequeath the antique silver tea set and a sum of $50,000 for her unwavering support, and then she found her name. Eleanor Vance. Her stomach dropped. To my independent daughter, Eleanor Vance, who has always forged her own path, I bequeath my collection of first edition classic novels, currently housed in the study. A collection of old books. That was it. For all the years, all the unpaid favors, the emotional labor, the thankless tasks, the constant presence while her siblings chased their own self-serving ambitions. A collection of old books. The words spun in her vision, blurring the crisp legal font into an unintelligible mess. It wasn't just the monetary value, it was the blatant, unequivocal declaration of her worth in their eyes, negligible, dispensed with. A sentimental trinket tossed aside, while the substantial legacy, the years of savings, the family home itself, were handed over to William, the perpetually struggling, the eternally irresponsible. And Sophia, the queen of passive aggression, received a significant cash gift for unwavering support Eleanor knew translated to carefully curated appearances and strategic manipulation. The cold knot of fury in her chest shattered, splintering into 1,000 shards of pure, agonizing pain. It wasn't just being excluded from a cruise, it wasn't just being exploited for free babysitting. This was the ultimate, irrefutable proof of her family's true regard. She was dispensable, an afterthought, barely even worth a footnote in the grand tapestry of their inheritance. Tears, hot and bitter, finally welled up, blurring the screen completely. She clutched her head, a choked sob escaping her lips. The air felt thin, suffocating. This wasn't just a legal document, it was a final, devastating pronouncement of her place in their lives. She was nothing to them. Absolutely nothing. It was her breaking point, an emotional freefall into a void of betrayal and unbearable grief. The initial freefall bottomed out, not into despair, but into a cold, hard stratum of resolve. Eleanor's grief, still a raw wound, began to crystallize into a quiet fury. They had stripped her bare, yet paradoxically, in doing so, they had also stripped away her lifelong obligation to them. There was a strange, terrifying freedom in that realization. Her fingers trembled as she found her mother, Evelyn Thorne's, contact in her phone. "Eleanor? Is everything all right, dear?" Evelyn's voice, usually a comforting lilt, now grated on Eleanor's ears, tainted by the bitter knowledge of betrayal. "No, Mom. Everything is far from all right," Eleanor began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I received Arthur Maxwell's email. The will. What exactly is going on?" A pause. A carefully constructed sigh. "Oh, that. Well, your father and I always wanted to make sure William was taken care of. He has so much on his plate, dear, with Catherine and the children, and his business ventures are, well, they need constant support. You're so independent, Eleanor. You've always managed perfectly well on your own. We knew you wouldn't mind." The familiar litany of justifications, worn smooth by years of repetition, was now utterly transparent. Eleanor's independence was not a strength to be proud of, but a convenient excuse for her neglect. William's needs were a bottomless pit, always prioritized over anyone else's fairness. Her chest tightened, but this time it was from a burning indignation, not sorrow. "So, my lifelong dedication, my quiet support, my constant presence, all of that equates to a pile of old books, while William gets everything. And you expect me to babysit his children and Sophia's, while you all swan around on a cruise that I'm not even invited to." Eleanor's voice rose, the carefully constructed composure fracturing. "Because I'm independent and manage on my own?" The words were acid. Another sigh, heavier this time, laced with subtle martyrdom. "Eleanor, don't be dramatic. It's family. We help each other. William truly needs you. And it's a small boat, dear, very exclusive. We thought you'd prefer to relax at home." Relax at home. Alone. The implication hung in the air like a noxious gas. Her mother's words, intended to soothe, only poured gasoline on the fire. Eleanor finally understood. There was no reasoning with this. There was no argument to be won, no logic that could penetrate their self-serving narrative. They saw her as a utility, a resource to be tapped, never an equal. A switch flipped. The years of quiet resentment, the simmering injustice, all coalesced into a single, defiant thought. "No," Eleanor stated, the words sharp and final. "No, I will not babysit. And no, I will not relax at home. I am done being your convenience, Mom. I am done being overlooked." Before Evelyn could sputter another protest, Eleanor pressed the end call button. Her thumb hovered, then moved with a decisive swipe. "William. Block. Sophia. Block. Evelyn. Block." The axe felt simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating, like severing an infected limb. The air in her small apartment suddenly felt lighter, though a tremor still ran through her. The rage, hot and fierce, demanded an outlet. It couldn't be directed at them anymore. They were gone, cut off. It had to be channeled, transformed. Eleanor snatched her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. A solo trip. Somewhere far away. Somewhere beautiful. Somewhere she could breathe. Colorado. A mountain retreat. A cabin nestled in the Rockies. She found one available that very weekend. Without a second thought, without a shred of guilt, she booked it. The cost was astronomical, a defiant splurge, a tangible assertion of her own worth. This wasn't an escape, it was a declaration. Her first, true act of self-preservation. The alarm's cheerful trill cut through the pre-dawn quiet, a jarring contrast to the heavy anticipation settling in Eleanor's chest. Today was the day. Her flight to Colorado, a tangible escape from the suffocating grasp of her family, was hours away. She moved with a practiced efficiency, her suitcase already packed, boarding pass loaded on her phone. Each item she placed in her carry-on felt like a brick in the wall she was building between her past and her future, a new foundation, free from the crumbling debris of expectation and resentment. Just as she was zipping her duffel, a frantic, insistent ringing echoed through her small apartment. The doorbell. Not a polite ding-dong, but an aggressive, sustained buzz that screamed impatience and entitlement. Who could it be at this hour? Her heart leaped into her throat, a primal instinct of dread tightening its grip. She glanced at the peephole, her breath catching. Sophia and William stood on her doorstep, their faces a mixture of manufactured concern and barely concealed fury. Beside them, like unwitting props, stood Sophia's two young children, clutching worn stuffed animals, their sleepy eyes wide with confusion. William's son, Leo, sniffled, burying his face in his mother's side. Sophia, ever the performer, offered a strained, sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. William, for his part, looked as if he was actively suppressing an outburst, his jaw clenched tight. "Eleanor, darling, open up. We know you're in there." Sophia's voice, though pitched to sound gentle, carried an icy edge. "We just want to talk. Please." Eleanor hesitated. Her first instinct was to ignore them, to let the buzzing fade into the background noise of her new life. But the thought of them rattling her door, escalating their antics, was worse. She needed to end this, cleanly, definitively. Taking a deep breath, she unlocked the door, bracing herself for the inevitable onslaught. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of emotion she didn't possess for them anymore. Her gaze swept over the children, a flicker of pity for their unwitting involvement, quickly squashed by a resurgence of anger at their parents' tactics. "What are we doing here?" William exploded, stepping forward, his voice rising. "What are you doing? Abandoning your family? Ignoring our calls? Mom told us you were going on some retreat. We came to talk some sense into you." He gestured wildly, almost hitting Sophia. "You can't just cut us off. We need you, Eleanor. We're family." Sophia quickly interjected, placing a placating hand on William's arm. "William, darling, calm down. Eleanor, we're worried about you. And about the kids. What kind of aunt just disappears when her sister and brother need help? Leo was so looking forward to seeing you, weren't you, sweetie?" She nudged her son forward, a clear attempt at emotional manipulation. William blanched. "That's not fair. The will is irrelevant to this. Mom did what she thought was best for the family. For us. You're single, you don't have a family to provide for, Eleanor. We do. We have children." He puffed out his chest, the self-pitying martyr. "And that gives you the right to exploit me?" Eleanor asked, stepping slightly back, creating a physical distance. "To treat me as an afterthought, an inconvenience, only useful when you need a favor? To exclude me from family events, then demand I sacrifice my time and energy for yours?" She looked from William to Sophia, her gaze unwavering. "I have established my boundaries. I am not babysitting. I am not your free resource. And I am not destroying the family. You both, and Mom, did that perfectly well yourselves when you decided I wasn't worth basic respect, let alone an equal share of our mother's legacy." Sophia's polite facade finally cracked. "Eleanor, you're being ridiculous. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. It's a cruise, not a lifetime exile. And the will, it was Mom's decision. She loves us all, but William needs it more." Her voice ended in a whine, a petulant child denied a toy. "No," Eleanor stated, her voice calm but firm, a steel rod running through it. "It's a lifetime of being treated as less than. And I'm done. My answer is no. I'm going on my trip. And from now on, my life is mine to live, free from your demands and your judgments." She looked directly at William's son, Leo, who was now openly staring, a tear tracking down his cheek. Children deserve parents who model integrity, not manipulation. With that, Eleanor reached out, grasping the doorknob. William lunged forward as if to stop her, but Sophia, seeing the unshakable resolve in Eleanor's eyes, held him back. "You'll regret this, Eleanor." William snarled, his face contorted in a mask of impotent rage. Eleanor didn't reply. She simply, deliberately, closed the door. The thud was final, echoing the definitive end of an era. She leaned against it for a moment, her heart hammering, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. But beneath the weariness, a spark ignited, hot, bright, and utterly her own. She had done it. She had faced them down, held her ground, and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. The apartment was silent now, save for the distant hum of city traffic. She picked up her bags, a lightness in her step she hadn't felt in years. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, a profound sense of liberation settled over her. The past was behind the closed door. Her future, boundless and untamed, lay ahead. The mountains beckoned, a silent promise of new beginnings. The crisp mountain air of Colorado filled Eleanor's lungs, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of her apartment and the suffocating presence of her family. Days bled into each other, marked only by the shifting light across the peaks and the quiet rustle of pine trees. Here, amidst the grandeur, she allowed herself to truly grieve, not just for the will, but for the family she had always longed for, a family that consistently chose greed and manipulation over genuine connection. The initial storm of fury and betrayal had receded, leaving behind a profound emptiness, a weary ache in her chest. She hiked until her muscles screamed, cooked simple meals, and stared at the stars, trying to find a pattern in the chaos of her life. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the hurt began to crystallize into something harder, something resembling resolve. The quiet solitude was a balm, but also a crucible, forging her spirit. She revisited the memory of Sophia and William, their children as props, their entitlement thick as mountain fog. The blatant invasion of her private space, the desperate, theatrical pleas for her to abandon her own life for their convenience, it all solidified her decision. There was no going back to the old Eleanor, the one who tried to fix, to understand, to accommodate. That woman had been disinherited, literally and figuratively. On the fifth day, with a reluctant sigh, Eleanor powered on her laptop. The digital world felt miles away, an unwelcome intrusion into her newfound peace. She skimmed through a handful of work emails, feeling a familiar tug of responsibility, before her eyes landed on an unread message from Arthur Maxwell. It was a follow-up to the initial notification about Evelyn's updated will, but the subject line now read, "Urgent. Regarding Mrs. Thorne's estate, important discrepancy." Her heart thudded. She clicked, dreading another layer of family dysfunction. The email was concise, professional, and chilling. Mr. Maxwell explained that in preparing for the probate process, his firm had uncovered an earlier will, dated 5 years prior, which clearly stipulated an equal division of Evelyn's assets among all 3 children. Crucially, this older document had never been formally revoked or superseded according to proper legal procedure. The new will Eleanor had received had been drafted under circumstances that now appeared questionable. While Mrs. Thorne did sign the more recent document, Maxwell wrote, there are indications that the process may have been influenced by external pressures. We have concerns regarding undue influence from certain family members, particularly given the drastic alteration in distribution and the timing of its creation relative to her deteriorating health and increasing dependence on William. Eleanor read the words again, a cold fire igniting in her veins. Undue influence. William. Of course. It was all a calculated scheme. Her mother hadn't just changed her mind, she had been coerced. The hurt she'd felt dissolved, replaced by a searing indignation that was sharper, purer than rage. This wasn't just about money, it was about blatant manipulation, a deep-seated contempt for her existence, and a legal injustice. The mountains, which had offered solace, now seemed to whisper a new purpose: justice. Her retreat was over. The fight, she realized, had just begun. Returning from the quiet solace of the mountains, Eleanor's steps carried a new weight, a blend of apprehension and fierce resolve. The moment her plane touched down, she felt the invisible threads of her past tightening, pulling her back into the fray, but this time, she was armed. She went straight from the airport to Arthur Maxwell's office, the city lights blurring past her window like a frantic, impatient heartbeat. Arthur, a man of silvered temples and keen, sympathetic eyes, greeted her with a solemn nod. The second, more urgent email he had sent during her retreat lay open on his screen. "Eleanor," he began, his voice low and steady, "we have a strong case for undue influence. The older will, the one dividing assets equally, was never officially revoked by legitimate means. It appears coerced." Eleanor listened, her jaw tight. The word coerced echoed her deepest fears. her quiet suspicions about William's relentless grip on their mother. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the profound disrespect, the invalidation of her entire existence within the family. "I want to contest it," she stated, her voice unwavering, a testament to her newfound resolve. Arthur nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. He sensed not just a wronged client, but a woman ready to fight. The moment the legal papers were served, the floodgates of familial fury burst open. Eleanor's phone, once silent, now became a conduit for their outrage. Sophia, her voice laced with venom, screamed accusations of greed and heartlessness, reminding Eleanor of her solitary life and how she didn't need the inheritance like William, who had a family to support. William, true to form, resorted to emotional blackmail, painting himself as the struggling patriarch and Eleanor as a cruel, vindictive sibling tearing the family apart. Their messages painted her as the villain, the one destroying the peace they so carefully constructed on a foundation of lies and exclusion. Eleanor, however, remained unyielding. Each hateful word only solidified her conviction. This wasn't just a legal battle, but a fight for her own narrative. The legal process began with a flurry of motions and countermotions, each document a sharpened arrow aimed at her family's carefully constructed facade. But just as the legal quagmire threatened to consume her, a lifeline appeared from the most unexpected quarter. Eleanor received an anonymous message through her work email, an untraceable account. "I know things about William's influence on your mother. I can help. Catherine Thorne." Eleanor stared at the screen, a mix of shock and cautious hope blooming in her chest. William's wife. The woman she barely knew, always quiet, always slightly distant, but whose eyes often held a flicker of something knowing, something weary. They met discreetly, in a quiet cafe far from their usual haunts. Catherine, usually impeccably composed, looked fragile, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her teacup. She spoke in hushed tones, detailing William's relentless psychological pressure on Evelyn, his constant laments about financial struggles, his subtle threats to cut off contact if his demands weren't met. He made her believe he was on the verge of ruin, that you, Eleanor, were fine on your own, strong enough to do without, Catherine whispered, her voice cracking. He manipulated her fears, her anxieties about his future, until she saw no other choice. "I couldn't stand by and watch him get away with it anymore. Not when it affects our children's future, and certainly not when it affects you." Her courage was immense, born of a quiet moral compass finally reaching its breaking point. The courtroom was a tense, hushed arena. When Catherine Thorne took the stand, a ripple of disbelief ran through the Thorne family section. Sophia gasped, while William's face contorted in a mask of betrayal and rage. Catherine, though nervous, spoke with unwavering conviction, recounting specific conversations, dates, and even the emotional state Evelyn was in during William's manipulative visits. Her testimony was precise, devastating, dismantling William's carefully woven narrative of needing support and Evelyn's natural preference. She described how William had systematically isolated Evelyn, feeding her distorted information, and how her attempts to intervene had been met with threats and emotional abuse. The judge, a stern woman known for her impartiality, listened intently, occasionally interjecting with pointed questions. The evidence mounted, bolstered by Arthur Maxwell's meticulous cross-examination of Sophia and William, exposing their inconsistencies and thinly veiled contempt for Eleanor. Finally, after weeks of grueling legal proceedings, the verdict was delivered. The judge's voice, clear and resonant, cut through the silence. Given the compelling evidence of undue influence, particularly the testimony of Catherine Thorne, this court finds that the latest will does not reflect the true, uncoerced wishes of Evelyn Thorne. Therefore, the original will, dividing assets equally among her children, is hereby reinstated. A collective gasp from the Thorne family, but Eleanor felt only a profound, silent exhale. Justice, not just for her inheritance, but for her worth, had been served. The gavel's echo faded, but the resonance within Eleanor's soul lingered, a quiet triumph against years of subtle erosion. The aftermath wasn't an explosive celebration, but a profound, almost reverent unburdening. She walked out of the courthouse, not as a victor gloating over fallen foes, but as someone finally, truly free. The weight of expectation, of needing to prove her worth to a family that refused to see it, had vanished, replaced by an invigorating lightness. Weeks later, a cream-colored envelope arrived, addressed in Evelyn's elegant, slightly shaky hand. Eleanor opened it with a mix of trepidation and curiosity. The letter was an apology of sorts, rambling, circuitous, laced with the familiar passive-aggressive tones Eleanor had grown up with. "I suppose William could be rather persuasive," Evelyn wrote, avoiding any direct admission of her own culpability, shifting blame gently, almost imperceptibly, to her favored son. There was a faint expression of regret for Eleanor's unhappiness, but no true recognition of the deep betrayal or the psychological toll it had exacted. It was a partial peace offering, born more of necessity and the stark reality of the legal ruling than genuine remorse. Eleanor read it, felt a fleeting pang of sadness for the mother she wished she had, then calmly filed it away, a relic of a past she was actively leaving behind. It offered no closure, for closure had to come from within. Eleanor often reflected on the bitter journey. The pain had been immense, the betrayal searing, but it had also been the catalyst for her liberation. She had been forced to stand alone, to fight for her inherent worth, not just her inheritance. The life she lived now, rich with authentic relationships, meaningful work, and unconditional love, was entirely her own creation. It was a life defined not by her family's conditional approval, but by her unwavering belief in her own inherent value. She had not only reclaimed her birthright, but, more importantly, her narrative.